As a parent of a teen, I'm sure you've encountered this by now. Video games. How do you limit it with your teenager? I honestly don't think I've encountered a professional in the field of psychology and family relations that would say that kids just aren't getting enough video games. Nobody says that. There's way too much, and we know that there are some negative effects. Now, I'm not saying video games are bad. In fact, there's a lot of redeeming factors about them. We're not here to talk about that today, because the problem that we usually run into, especially with teenagers, is the amount of time that they're spending engaged in these games, which takes them away from other productive activities that could really enhance and enrich their life. Remember, your job as a parent is to love them, no matter what and even if. It's not to make sure that they don't get addicted to video games, although we're going to try to do that. Our main job is to love them no matter what and even if. Coming from that position as a parent actually empowers you to do a better job setting some of the limits. Vicki and I have spent some time putting together the Parenting Power-Up. And if you haven't connected to that yet, there's a link in the description down below. I'm referencing that course because we spent some time talking about 3 stages of moral development. It's really important to understand these 3 stages so that we'll know how to approach our teenager about the video game issue. Quick review. Stage 1, selfish, self-centered, unwilling to cooperate, feeling entitled and demanding and throwing tantrums and fighting and arguing. Does this sound familiar to anybody? This is stage 1. It's important to identify whether your kid's in stage 1 before we move ahead, because if they are, we have to take a particular approach that does not require cooperation, because you don't get any cooperation until stage 2 kicks in. Again, if you need a review of those 3 stages, get to the Parenting Power-Up and study up on that. It's going to really help you in your approach as a parent. If your kid is on stage 1 and you've correctly identified that they're not going to cooperate with you on this, then you have to take control of the device or the access to the game. I don't want to play hardball with kids, but if we have to, we have to. And if your kids are on stage 1, that's all you can do because they're not listening to you, they're not cooperating with you. So take control of the device or the access to the game. Sometimes we have to do a little more thinking than we want to, but probably not as much as we fear. Enforcement is completely your responsibility if you've got a kid on stage 1. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of leeway if we're on stage 2. We'll get to that in just a minute. But on stage 1, you cannot count on your kids to cooperate with the limits that you're setting. I still remember one of the dads that I worked with, and he said, well, I've restricted my son from the computer, and as soon as I leave, he's back on it. Okay, we have an enforcement problem here. Can you do enough thinking as a parent to figure out how to control access to a device when you're not there? Yeah, be creative. You'll come up with some good stuff. This particular dad realized, oh yeah, there's a removable power cord on that thing. Quick enforcement, isn't it? Then he doesn't have to rely on his son to cooperate with the limit that he's set. This is so important on stage 1 because you don't get cooperation until stage 2. Set clear criteria for what behaviors are required in order for them to regain access, and then be willing to enforce it. It's on you. Let's go to stage 2 for a minute. This is actually a whole lot more fun because at stage 2, we stop fighting and start cooperating. At stage 2, I don't want any trouble. I want to keep the peace. So I'm going to negotiate. I'm going to communicate. I'm willing to cooperate. Now, I'm talking about your teenager, but I'm talking about you too. And I want parents to be on stage 3 if possible, but at least on stage 2 where you're reasonable and rational and not fighting and screaming and yelling like your kids are. At stage 2, we have a whole lot more available to us to handle this problem of the video game, and it starts with communication. Talk to them. Communicate. Open up some lines of communication with your teenager to help them to see what your concerns are and the why behind setting limits. Opportunity cost, for example, is a big one here. And your teenager might make an argument, hey, this game isn't bad. Right, don't argue that. Let them have that point. Say simply, yes, I know that you would choose good games. Okay, you're going to just kind of seed that idea. But then you also introduce the idea of opportunity cost. While you're playing the game, you're not doing anything else. Your homework, mowing the lawn, earning some money. And that's the opportunity cost. That's what it's costing to engage in that game. So this communication is something that you can do when your kid's on stage 2. And I highly recommend that you start with the communication. Don't jump in and just try to restrict all the games if they're willing to cooperate with you. Go to the communication. And you can also draw out from them what their ideas are, what the limits should be, what might work best for them. Negotiate, come up with some kind of a win-win solution. This is far better, and you'll have a lot less resistance when they're involved in that communication. It's just that they have to be on stage 2 in order for this to work. Well, what about stage 3? Stage 3 is where they're truly responsible. They take initiative. They have values and morals and ethics that drive their behavior. Do you think we're going to have to intervene much at stage 3? No. At stage 3, just smile. Enjoy that, because that's awesome. I know I referenced the Parenting Power Up quite a bit in this video, and that's because Vicki and I have spent some time going into detail on each of those 3 stages so that you as a parent can have every tool you need to interact effectively with not only your teenagers, but your younger kids as well. The link's right over there, or you can get it in the description below, parentingpowerup.com. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you tomorrow.